Hey, what's up, everybody? This is your boy Kenny, and this is Oprah's Masterclass Season 6, and this episode is about James Todd Smith. Most of us know him as LL Cool J, and I have to go to say this was a really good episode. He gave a lot of points, he definitely uses his life as a class, and it was really a great episode, and I even learned a lot from it. And I'm glad I'm able to give you guys this review because I was supposed to be out of town today, but I'm under the weather, so I wasn't able to go. But I'm glad I'm able to be here and actually give you this review because I really did enjoy this episode. And he made a lot of great points, so let me get started. Pretty much the first point he makes in this episode is let them shape you. And he credits this to his grandparents and his upbringing. Because he said when he was younger, he had a thing for mini bikes and motorcycles. And, he had a friend who had a mini bike, but, the ignition, I think, he had problems with, getting the ignition. So the only way he can get it was that he had to tie it with a shoestring. But the problem was that it would work, but you couldn't use the brakes. So if you used the brakes, it would cut off. So LL Cool J talks about riding this around the neighborhood. He's dodging cars, dodging people, and he can't use the brakes. And eventually he drives into a bush where he just gets mad and just goes home. He says his friend was mad that he left his bike, but his friend got his bike back. But then all of a sudden when he got home, his grandfather was like, were you just riding around in the neighborhood, on some, mini bike? And he was like, nah, Grandpa, that wasn't me. But his grandfather knew it was him. So he said that his grandfather began to, kind of like do things with him to kind of shield him from the negative side of the neighborhood, to kind of keep him out of trouble. One thing that he shared his passion with his grandson was music because he said his grandfather used to be a jazz musician and he also was a World War II vet. So he said he said in the basement there were a lot of records, records of like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, you name it. But he said that he said around this time when he's growing up, rap music is starting to become, mainstream, and he's hearing about groups like, the Treacherous Three, Sugar Hill Gang, the Crash Crew. So he's really developed a strong influence, into rap music, and pretty much he actually credits his grandparents, for helping to keep him out of trouble and always trying to direct him into doing things that were more positive and things that were more productive rather than doing things that were destructive because, that was going on around him. But then he also learned some really great lessons from his grandfather that, never leave until it's done. Do it right or not at all. And he says it was a great mantra that even to this day he lives off of. Believe in yourself, never leave until it's done, and, stick with the process. And he says that is what he put into being a rap artist and every other thing he's done in his career. Another point they make in this episode is see it through. He talks about at first, one of his dreams was to be a football player. But his grandmother said that it was that football was too violent. And around this time, I think he had moved from Queens to Long Island. And he said he kind of moved back and forth between Queens and Long Island throughout his young life. And he had said that, they had lived in Long Island. And he said that my grandmother probably said that because she didn't want to drive me all the way to Queens where that was the part of the football team he was a part of. They was in Queens and they would play at this field, and she was like she didn't want him around that negative environment. But he said that it's funny that she said that football was too violent, but then she enrolled me in karate because she wanted me to learn how to defend myself. And he said while doing karate he began to develop a love and a passion for Bruce Lee. And I can actually share that with him because I love Bruce Lee. I mean, I have his movies, his collection, and there's times that even as kids, me and my brother were big Bruce Lee fans. We would order Chinese food and would just literally be watching Bruce Lee and would be completely zoned in. Like, that's how magnetic and great Bruce Lee is. And he said that Bruce Lee was the person that gave him the influence to want to try acting, because he said that Bruce Lee was the only dark person that he saw on television, because at that time in movies you only saw white people. But Bruce Lee was different, and he was very captivating. And he said that he said he loved how Bruce Lee did action, and it made him inspired to want to be an action actor, which is what we definitely see him do on NCIS Los Angeles. And he's pretty much said that when he first started that show, he didn't know how long the show was going to run or how great the show was going to be, but he said, I chose to see it through. And he says now we're in our 8th season and it's already in syndication. So he learned from not only his grandfather, but also being influenced by Bruce Lee to see it through. See what the possibilities are. Don't be so quick to walk away. If you take an opportunity, see it through. And then the next part, he actually talks about, let's see. The next point he makes is don't let anything stop you. And he talks about, and the great thing about this is that LL Cool J was actually the first mainstream artist on Def Jam Records. He was pretty much discovered by, Rick Rubin, and he really tells about this remarkable story of how he, was constantly shipping out his demos and, was like sending them to different labels and, was trying to get himself signed. And he actually bought a record from Def Jam, and like on record they actually had Rick Rubin's dorm number. So pretty much what he did is that he called the number, he got the address, and he's been sending his demos in. And he said often he would call Rick Rubin to see, did you get the demo? Did you get the demo? And for a while he didn't get it, but one of the members of the Beastie Boys heard his demo, and he was the one who took it to Rick Rubin, and that was his introduction. And finally Rick Rubin told him that, we heard your demo, let's set something up. So he finally met Rick Rubin, and he was saying that he was shocked because we know Rick Rubin that he's Jewish. So he was like, yo, I actually thought you were black. And he was like, and then Rick Rubin was like, yeah, I know, right? So they immediately just clicked, and they went into the studio and did this demo, and they tried to and he pretty much took the demo to Russell Simmons, who was his partner at the time, and he was managing groups like the Beastie Boys and Run DMC, and they took it to Russell Simmons, and Russell Simmons was like, he rejected it. He was like, nah, it sounds like what's already out there. I'm not really feeling it. So he said at that time it frustrated him, but then again he said that it wasn't right, and he didn't let that stop him. So they went back in the studio, and the demo that he created was one of the pioneer tracks of hip hop, I Need a Beat. And that's what got him the deal. And definitely one of his first mainstream appearances was in the movie Crush Groove, which was back in 1985. I mean, Crush Groove was that hip hop movie. I mean, it had some of the biggest influences of hip hop that were in that movie. Run DMC was in it, Fat Boys was in it, Sheila E. So many different artists was in that movie. But this was the introduction to LL Cool J, and at the time he was 16. And in the scene, Rick Rubin's in the scene, and also Andre Harrell, who would be who will be known for discovering, who will be known for, for discovering Mary J. Blige and also Sean Puffy Combs. So, Sean P. Diddy Combs, that is. So, it was cool seeing Andre Harrell, Rick Rubin, all in this scene with him when he's rapping about, this, another great track, I Need My Radio. So, from that point, he just made leaps. And he said that the age of 16 was very important to him because his grandfather constantly instilled that in him. It's like, if you acting like this, what you going to be when you're 16? What's going to happen to you when you're 16? So he said that being 16 was very important to him and that he wanted to set a track where it will actually carry him to a positive life and it will set him on a path to greatness. So he said your age 16 was very important to him, and he took it seriously. And it just so happens at 16, he was introduced to the world as LL Cool J. Ladies love Cool James. Another point he makes is let it go. And in this was a very heart-wrenching, part of the show because he talks about, about his father. And that his father and his mom had a very volatile relationship where he was physically abusive, and they pretty much separated when he was like around 4 or 5 years old. But then he said that after they split up, the violence got worse because in a fit of rage, his father shot his mother and his grandfather, and they both lived. And he kind of like evaded the authorities, but when his mother had the chance to press charges, she didn't. And he said that people on the outside would think like, you're crazy as hell, why would you do that? But he said that he admired his mother, that she had such a forgiving spirit, and that she wasn't going to go down that road, that this man shot me, but I lived and I'm still here. I don't need to go back down that road again, so I'm going to let it go. And he also said that it was his mother that actually brought his father back into his life when he needed his father, because he was young, he was being influenced by the street, his kid, his friends, because he said he had a lot of thug friends, so he was being influenced by that lifestyle, that idea of get rich quick, cream get the money, he was kind of like being influenced by the street, and his father was there to kind of guide him away from a lot of bad decisions. And then he said that another thing he learned by this lesson is that you have to forgive, and and that forgiveness is powerful. He said his father made mistakes, but his father corrected his mistakes, because he said his father ended up getting remarried, he had a good marriage, he had 2 other children, and he began to live a positive life. So he said that he admires his mother for forgiving him, but then he also admired his father for making the change for the better. And then he actually talks about this line that he wrote that you can't eat while having beef with people underneath. He actually said that he actually said something else like, I think beef with mother underneath. I think that was probably the real lyric. But then he's pretty much saying that holding on to grudges and holding on to anger is like having a wasp sticking you over and over and over again, and it never gets any better. So what better to do than to just let it go? And I thought that was a very, very special moment because, I myself have actually had some traumatic experiences in my life, and I learned that, by forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you, because it frees you to move forward without any bitterness or any grudge. So I thought that was very, very powerful. Another point he makes in this video, another point he makes in this episode, is rise above. And then he talks about people who are in prison, that he said that you probably got some of your best people in prison right now who are living life sentences based off of a bad decision they made. And he said that he pretty much said that like throughout my life, I know that change is possible. And that, a lot of some of these great people, were actually at one point probably some of the best and greatest, that society had to offer, but yet due to their circumstances, they got caught up in the fast lane of life, hustling, women, cars, jewelry, and he said even for himself, he was influenced by that. And he's like, look, maybe if I do this, I can get what that guy has. I can get that car. I can get a fine female like that on my arm. I can get, nice. I can have nice things, and I can have money. So he said that a lot of people get caught up in that life, because they didn't have, no other influence to actually show them another way. So they went to, they're saying like, look, if you want to make it, you got to hustle. So they went to the first hustle that, that was available, which was hustling, which was, selling drugs or whatever may have you, And he said a lot of these people got caught up and are now in prison, and like now they, these people who could have been productive members of society are now just incarcerated, they're pretty much just incarcerated in prison, and he's saying that, he's pretty much making the call that, look, everybody in prison is not a bad person. Everybody in prison, is not evil. Some people in prison are there because they made a bad decision in their life that has now ruined their life altogether. And he's saying that, look, we have to learn to rise above this, and that, look, not every person in prison is a bad person of society. Sometimes some of your best and some of your greatest people are in jail. And he's saying that we have to kind of look at the system and really kind of examine, that, like, how do we, change the situation where, people who have made mistakes in their past but have changed and have progressed, why can't they get a second chance? And I thought that was very unique, and I was glad that he shared that. Another point he makes in this episode is keep the hunger, and he's saying, he talks about, pretty much they also share a segment with him and his wife Simone, and they pretty much she pretty much says that what makes their marriage strong and what's made their marriage last was picking their battles. And she said that she had an issue with doing the video because the girl like licked his face in the video, and he actually talks about that he likes the fact that his wife is very outspoken, because he says he's more like an introvert, he's more diplomatic, he's more laid back, but he says that he's kind of a loner, and he says that he's a loner not because he doesn't like being around people, he's a loner because he thinks a lot. And I can relate to that because I'm somewhat of a loner myself. But then he says that, the great thing about his relationship with Simone is that she keeps him grounded because, her being outspoken, him being really calm and very, a loner, they play off of each other. And he said that the main thing that, he said another main thing that drives him is his children. And he says that, look, I'm not the perfect person, but I do take credit that I'm a man that's going to do for my family and do for my kids. And he says I've always supported my children and I've always supported my family. And he says that, look, I'm a stand-up guy, but I'm not perfect. And I definitely respect that. I mean, definitely respect that all the way. And that he even talks about how the way he raises his children, he's like a blue-collar guy with a blue-collar mentality. Like, you have to work for what you want. He said, yeah, I got all this money and all these accolades, but I'm not going to spoil my children. I'm going to encourage my children. I'm going to support my children, but I'm also going to constantly let my children know that, look, you got to work for what you want. It's not going to be handed to you. You have to earn it. And he says that, by spoiling your kids, you sometimes stifle their creativity because their creativity is what makes them who they are. It's what makes them unique. And he says if you take away their creativity, you actually rob them from living. So he always influences children to be creative and to be the masters of their destiny. So I thought that was very profound. And then he talks about, as far as like keeping the hunger, that he talks about like when he was trying to ship out his demo tapes. He just kept that hunger going. He just kept that drive going. That he didn't let the setback stop him. He just kept going forward. And he's like, you got to keep the hunger going. You have to keep that drive going, because that is what keeps you. It keeps you focused and it keeps you moving. Another point he made was be a pro player, and he said that sports is definitely a great thing to look at, because he says that even the greatest players lose sometimes. And he starts talking about Kobe and Michael Jordan, like they've lost many games. But he said, but that doesn't mean you're not a pro. It doesn't mean you're not a great player. It doesn't mean that you're not great. And then he talks about how he would set out all these different demo tapes before he landed his deal with Def Jam. He would send out all these different demo tapes, and he would get rejection letters. And it got to the point where at 16, he was going to quit rapping. And he said he had got a rejection letter from a label. He balled it up and threw it across the room. His mom picked it up and said that, you got another rejection letter? And he's like, you know what, I can't do this no more, Mom. I'm going to quit. I'm so against this. It's just not working for me. Then he's saying that, I need like a drum machine. I need better equipment. And it just so happens his mom got her tax return, and what she did is that she bought him a drum machine. So he said that, that inspired him, because she let him know that just because you got knocked down doesn't mean it's over. And then he said one thing that was golden throughout this entire episode, that success is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, wow, that is very profound. Because people think success is when you win. I mean, yeah, it's about winning, it's about succeeding, but then it's also what makes you successful is that you can get knocked down, but you continue to get back up. You continue to believe in yourself. You continue to believe in your passion and what you're meant to do. You believe in your calling that's on your life, and you don't allow the failure to make you lose your enthusiasm as to what you're meant to do and what you're meant to and what you're meant to accomplish. And he said, can you imagine how many people never learn from their failures, and because of that they are where they are and they've never achieved it? So I thought that was definitely a profound point. And another point he makes in this episode is choose the freedom. He's saying that, as an artist, he had made choices that weren't popular. He made choices that were, and he says the thing about the music industry, they want you to kind of stay with what's current. They want you to kind of, to not stray from the formula, the formula that's making the money. But, and he says that, being an artist, he wanted to explore different avenues. Because he said he had different influences. He said that, I listened to the Beatles and many different other, genres of music, and I never wanted to be pigeonholed, into being that this is what it has to be and this is it. So he said that, yeah, he took some backlash for making certain decisions or making certain records that didn't go well with the public, but he says that I took freedom over acceptance, because freedom is where you have the most power. It's where you have the most. It's what makes you authentic. It's what makes you real. And then the last point he makes is chase the light. And he talks about a situation where when he was in high school, he had played hooky, and he was hanging out with some friends, and they were smoking weed in his garage. And he said that the garage was really dark, and there was like a little light coming in. And he said that he had smoked before, but this time he just stayed in the corner and just watched them smoking. And he was sitting there thinking, like, there's got to be more than light than this. And he was saying that, you know, he said he had a close friend, and all he did was smoke weed all day. He's like, there's got to be more than light than this. So he's saying that, look, you have to always have your eye open for opportunities, luck, blessings, you know, and take advantage of them. There's always a little light, and you have to take advantage of that little light. You have to seize the opportunity, you know, because he says great things can happen, and if you don't believe great things can happen, you will always be trapped in darkness. So that's what I have. So if I missed anything, put it down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. But subscribe to my channel. Click that bell so you can get notifications every time I drop a video. Like this video, comment on this video, and share this video. And I will be back with the next episode of Oprah's Masterclass. So until then, everybody, take care.